Nobody used a camera more than Cameron Tucker. Nobody sat in the chair more often or more dramatically. That's the problem. Throughout the whole show, Cam never actually told the truth to any of the people in his life. He's the most watched character, but unfortunately, he's also completely alone. Start with Fizbo. One of our first real introductions to Cam's recurring alter ego is him arriving in full clown makeup for Luke's birthday party. The writers picked a clown on purpose. There's a real pattern in the psychology of comedy called the sad clown paradox. Performers who build their whole personality around making other people laugh are more likely to be hiding real loneliness or depression underneath it. The entertainer is usually the last person anyone checks on, because if you're always on, people assume you're fine by default. Nobody checks on the clown, and that's what the face paint is for. I've noticed the same thing with a couple of people in my own life. The friend who can be real, open, and honest is usually the one who's actually fine. The friend who can't turn it off, even when it's just the two of you, is usually the one who's struggling and hiding something deeper. That pretty much became Cam's template for the next decade. Big entrances, big voice, big feelings, performed loud enough that nobody has to ask if they're real. Every dinner, every party, every disagreement, Cam shows up like there's an audience, because to him, there always is. A real clown act works because someone takes the makeup off backstage and asks how you're doing. Cam never really had that backstage. He had the show, and then he had the same show at home. That's why the confessionals matter. You'd expect that camera to give us the unfiltered version of Cam. It doesn't. Watch them closely and you'll see he's still performing for it. He's building to a punchline. He's telling the version of the story that makes him look good, or funny, or wounded in a flattering way. Mitchell's confessionals are anxious and plain, Claire's are blunt and tired, Cam's are all staged. Even alone with a camera crew, he can't stop directing the scene. That matters because this show gave every character one space that was supposed to be free of performance, and Cam basically turned it into another stage. Not because he's shallow, but because part of him doesn't know how to stop. If the one moment built for honesty gets performed too, then there's no place left where honest Cam can actually show up. Now look at Mitchell. On paper, this is the healthiest relationship in the show. Genuinely loving, genuinely committed, but go back through the seasons and count the fights that start with some version of who had the harder day, who sacrifices more, who's underappreciated. It happens constantly, and it's almost always Cam who starts it. Most people would brush that off as Cam being dramatic, and don't get me wrong, he is. But a person doesn't keep asking whether they're valued by someone who's supposed to have already settled that a long time ago unless they're actually not sure. Cam picks fights about being underappreciated because part of him isn't convinced he's appreciated at all. He needs it proven again and again. Mitchell does love him, that was never really in question. But loving someone and making them feel secure aren't the same skill. Mitchell is buttoned up and conflict avoidant, and he mostly answers Cam's need for reassurance by rolling his eyes and calling it Cam being Cam. That's a dismissal disguised as an inside joke. There's a similar pattern that backs this up. Watch how the family reacts to Cam's big moments. The karaoke performances, the pageants, the long dramatic speeches at dinner. The reaction is almost never, "That was great." It's some version of, "That's enough," said with a laugh so it lands as teasing instead of what it actually is, which is essentially a ceiling. This family has an amount of Cam it considers acceptable, and the joke is always that he always goes past it. Nobody has to say, "Stop being yourself" out loud. A tired laugh does the job just fine, over and over again, for 11 years straight. Now here's a detail that matters the most. Cam grew up on a farm in Missouri, and for years, the show portrayed him as the least athletic person alive, a man whose idea of exercise is a clown routine. Then, a few seasons in, it comes out almost as a punchline. Cam wasn't just athletic, he was a genuinely gifted quarterback back home, good enough that it was a real part of who he was before he ever left the state. He didn't lose it, he just buried it because at some point he decided that that version of himself, the athlete from a small conservative town, didn't have room for the version of him that was gay. He chose which version of himself got to survive the move to the big city, and it wasn't the one his hometown might have actually been proud of. That's not a fun character reveal. That's a man who cut off a piece of his own identity because he didn't think both halves were allowed to exist in the same room. Then he spent a decade performing a loud, safe, unthreatening version of himself instead, built so nobody, including maybe himself, would be reminded of who he used to be. That decision didn't come out of nowhere. What we see of Cam's relationship with his own father is thin, but it's telling. This is a man who needed years to even get comfortable saying the word gay out loud about his own son, let alone say he was proud of him. Now compare that to how loudly Cam performs for everyone else. Every school project, every recital, every small achievement in the house gets fully celebrated by Cam. Even his sister Pam says it. He's a celebrator. Because he grew up with very little of it, he turned himself into the loudest source of unconditional praise his family had. People don't usually become the family hype man because it comes naturally. They become the hype man because they know exactly what silence sounds like when nobody fills it for you, and they've decided to be that one person that keeps everyone from feeling that silence while simultaneously feeling it themselves internally. Then there's baby Cal. For a stretch of episodes, Cam and Mitchell foster Cam's baby nephew. They completely fall in love with him, and then they have to give him back when his sister Pam is able to take him back after her release from prison. Underneath, it's one of the most quietly devastating stretches this show ever attempts. Cam, the most emotionally expressive person in the family, the man who cries at commercials, barely gets room to fall apart on screen. If anything, they just sweep it under the rug. The show moves through it so fast and gets back to the jokes within an episode or two, but that's because of the format. It has to. Cam himself has to. But think about what that means for Cam specifically. The one person built to perform every emotion at full volume has his single most legitimate, most devastating grief compressed into a subplot. The most theatrical man in the show doesn't get to be theatrical about the one thing that would have actually earned it. Now the kicker of it all, the finale. After 11 seasons of being the punchline and the sidekick, the guy who peaked as a farm town quarterback and buried it, Cam gets offered a real coaching job back home at the exact kind of program that would have made teenage Cam's whole year. It was basically his dream job. It's the show finally handing him proof that the self he cut off to survive the move was worth something after all. But then the show ends right there. Right at the start of him actually getting to live his authentic self instead of performing his way toward it. We never see what it looks like for Cam to just be good at something and believe it, without turning it into a bit first. 11 years of performing for approval, and the one time life hands him something real without making him sell it, the show cuts away. I don't think this family is a villain. Nobody in that house said to make him feel invisible, feel lonely, and in their own clumsy way, they loved him constantly. They genuinely did. But that's the point. You can be loved constantly and still not feel seen, because being seen means someone looks past performance and can build that performance so early that hardly anyone thought to try. He wasn't overlooked. He was applauded every time he walked into a room. And unfortunately, that's exactly how he stayed invisible for 11 years. Nobody clapped for the Cam underneath the clown makeup because nobody, not even Mitchell, ever really saw that Cam to begin with. Now the question is, did Cam make an effort to make his fully authentic self known, or was he kind of forced to stay in that hole? Thanks for listening. Let me know where you land in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.